Tycoon returns to find his ex-wife and the twins who call him Dad in an abandoned city. He was no longer the man who had ridden out a decade ago in gleaming armor, praised as the Lion of the Realm. His name was Lord Daehyun, once the richest and most powerful merchant king in the southern provinces, a man whose signature sealed treaties and started wars. But now, his shoulders were weighed with regret more than gold. His once jet-black hair had faded to the color of ashes, and his eyes, once sharp and commanding, now carried a distant sadness, the kind only known by those who had lost more than they ever dreamed they would. As he approached the city gates, broken and half-burnt, he pulled his horse to a halt. Silence. Only the wind, whispering through the bones of the fallen buildings. His voice, roughened by time and war, cracked through the stillness. "Vulharis, what have they done to you?" He dismounted, his boots sinking into soft, untouched dust. No footprints, no carts, no guards. The city was dead. Yet he had come home. His heart pounded, not from fear, but the slow, creeping dread of memory. This was once a city of joy and color. The scent of bread used to float from bakeries before sunrise. Children would run barefoot through the stone plazas, and the laughter of merchants echoed like music in the streets. Now it was a graveyard. Daehyun walked through the ruins, his hand brushing the side of a collapsed column. Every stone whispered a different name, every broken window a story. He passed what once had been the tailor's shop, where his wife, Lady Cian, used to bring him small gifts sewn with her own hands, tokens of love that he had come to take for granted. There was a bench they once sat on during the Festival of Lanterns, where she had confessed she was with child. He had smiled and kissed her then, not realizing it would be one of their final moments of peace. As he wandered deeper, the morning light began to filter through the broken arches. A ruined statue of himself, cracked down the middle, lay forgotten in the center of the square. He stared at it for a long time. "A monument to my pride," he muttered bitterly. And pride brought nothing but ashes. He fell to his knees, not out of weariness, but grief. "I should never have left," he whispered, voice trembling. He had chosen war. He had chosen the king's favor. He had chosen conquest over fatherhood, power over presence. And when the letters from Cian had stopped coming, when he finally rode back after the war was won, he found no wife waiting, no home, no warm embrace. She had vanished. Some said she had fled the plague. Others whispered she had died. But he refused to believe either. A part of him, broken and buried deep, clung to the hope that she was alive somewhere waiting. He stood again, slower this time, brushing the dirt from his cloak. The sound of the wind shifted, carried something faint, a child's laughter. His head turned sharply. Impossible. No one lived here anymore. The entire city had been deemed cursed, marked by the heavens, left to rot as a warning to the living. Yet the sound came again, light, joyful, echoing like a bell. He moved quickly, his warrior's instincts reawakening. Down the alley, past the old baker's shop, beneath the remnants of the watermill. There, footsteps, small ones, then the flash of a cloak disappearing behind a broken gate. Daehyun didn't call out. He followed in silence, heart pounding. He slipped through the shadows, cautious, alert. Then he saw it. Beneath the remnants of the old cathedral, someone had built a makeshift shelter. Blankets, scraps of cloth, a small fire still smoldering. Someone was living here. A rustle. Two small figures emerged, twins by the look of them. A boy and a girl, perhaps 7 or 8 winters old. Dirty, thin, but bright-eyed and full of life in this place of death. They didn't notice him at first, whispering to one another as they played with a handmade doll fashioned from twine and rags. Then the boy turned. Their eyes met. For a moment, time stopped. The boy's expression changed, not fear, but recognition. He stepped forward, pulling something from under his tunic. A silver medallion. Daehyun froze. That medallion had once belonged to him. The boy held it out carefully. "Are you the man in the pendant?" the boy asked softly. "Mama said you were far away, but you'd come back one day. She said you were brave, and that you used to love her once. Daehyun's knees buckled again. His throat closed. His eyes burned. The girl came to her brother's side, peering curiously. "Are you our father?" It was not a question. It was a whisper of longing, a plea that had lived in their hearts without ever having a voice. Daehyun could not answer. He could only nod, once, twice, before the tears finally came, silent and unstoppable. "Yes," he breathed. "Yes, I am." The boy stepped forward, hesitant. The girl reached for his hand, and just like that, in the broken heart of a ruined city, life began again. But from the shadows someone was watching. Lady Sian, wrapped in a dark cloak, unseen by the children, her eyes filled with fire and fear. He sat beside the small fire the children had left behind, the warmth hardly reaching his bones. His hands trembled as he held the silver medallion the boy had given him. The edges were worn, the engraving faded, but the inscription remained, "To Daehyun, for every sunrise you miss, come back to us." Sian had given it to him the night before he left for war. He had promised he would return in 6 moons. It had been 10 winters. The fire crackled softly, and the boy, Hanul, returned with the girl, Era, both of them holding bread, stale but precious. "Here," Era said shyly, placing a piece in his hand. "We saved this. Mama says we always share when we find something." Daehyun looked at the bread, then at the girl's eyes. Brown. Deep, soft brown. Sian's eyes. He cleared his throat, forcing his voice steady. "Your mother. Where is she?" The children exchanged a glance. "She goes away sometimes," Hanul said. "Not far. Just places. She says it's to help the sick ones." "There are others here?" Daehyun asked quickly, hope blooming. Era nodded. "Hidden like us, in the dark places. Mama says they're afraid of being found. By bad people. She makes medicine from flowers and roots. But sometimes she cries at night, when she thinks we're asleep." Daehyun swallowed hard. That was just like her. Even in ruins, even surrounded by death, Sian had chosen to heal rather than flee. Her courage both warmed and shamed him. "Do you know why this city is empty?" he asked, glancing around. "What happened here?" Hanul bit his lip. "Mama said. A sickness came. It started in the lower wells. People got fevers and some went mad. The gates were closed, and no one was allowed in or out. Some tried to escape. Soldiers stopped them. She said they burned the outer walls," Era added, voice small, "to stop the spread. The fire went too far. There was screaming. We were hiding in the cellar then." Daehyun closed his eyes. Fire, screams, all for containment. He remembered the letters that had stopped, the silence that followed, and now he understood. The city hadn't just fallen. It had been sacrificed. "Did your mother ever mention me?" he asked quietly, ashamed to even voice it. Hanul looked up, thoughtful. "Only when you were asleep in the pendant. She said you were a great man once, and that sometimes people get lost chasing things they think are important." Daehyun's chest ached. "She didn't say you were bad," Era offered gently. "She just said she stopped waiting. That waiting made her sick." A crack rang out in the distance. Not natural. Sharp. Metallic. Daehyun's instincts flared. He rose immediately, motioning the children to stay behind him. His hand went to his side, empty. No sword. He hadn't worn one for months. He had come not as a warrior, but a man broken by time. "Hide," he whispered. "Don't come out until I say." The children didn't argue. They vanished into the shadows of the cathedral ruins, slipping through cracks only the small and clever could find. The sound came again. Closer. He stepped out into the open street. What had once been a bustling market square now stood silent, cluttered with broken wagons, shattered pottery, and bones buried in dust. From behind a collapsed stone arch, a figure emerged. She was cloaked in deep gray, her face obscured beneath a hood. But he knew that silhouette. He knew the way she moved, deliberate, graceful, cautious. A voice long buried echoed in his mind like a prayer. "Sian," he breathed. She didn't speak at first. She simply stared at him, unmoving. He stepped forward, slowly, uncertain if she would vanish like a dream. "It's really you." Her voice was quiet, but sharp. "I told them not to speak to strangers. They knew me. From the pendant. I should have thrown it into the river," she said bitterly. Dae-hyun flinched. "I searched for you. After the war. I came back. After years, Dae-hyun. After the walls burned and the bells stopped ringing." Her hood fell back, revealing a face both familiar and foreign. Older, paler, but beautiful still, like marble carved by sorrow. "You chose ambition. You chose conquest. I didn't know," he said, stepping closer, desperate. "If I had, you would have still left," she interrupted. "Because back then you wanted to be more than a husband, more than a father. You wanted to be a legend." He fell silent. "Do you know how many I buried here?" she continued, voice trembling now. "Friends, children, mothers, all because your city was a prize. You weren't here to protect it." "I've changed," he said, and meant it. "I came back not for a title, not for gold, but for you, for them." Tears glistened in her eyes, but they did not fall. She looked at him long, hard. "They think you're their father," she said at last. His heart stopped. "Think?" She turned from him then, walking back into the shadow of the ruined square. "I didn't lie to them," she said over her shoulder. "But I didn't tell them everything either. Couldn't. You'll have to earn that truth." Then she was gone, leaving only silence, and the cold certainty that though he had found them, nothing would ever be as it was. Valharis was not just a ruined city. He thought he was prepared for this. He thought finding them would bring relief, even healing. But now, the past rose like a tidal wave, crashing over every hope he had carefully guarded in the silence of his journey. Had she found someone else? Had someone else held her when she cried? Protected the children when he wasn't there? The questions burned in his mind, louder than reason, crueler than doubt. He returned to the shelter beneath the cathedral as twilight began to fall. The fire was out, the children asleep beneath patched blankets. He sat beside them, his back to the cracked wall, watching their small faces in the dimness. Hanul curled protectively around his sister, even in sleep. And for the first time in years, Dae-hyun wept. Not in battle, not in anger, but in helplessness. Quiet, broken sobs that escaped despite every effort to contain them. He had been a fool. A flash of memory clawed to the surface. Sian, barefoot in the grass, her hands cradling her swollen belly. Her voice had been so soft that night. "When you're gone, will you still think of me?" "Every morning," he had replied, cupping her face. "Every night, I will carry your name like armor." But then the war came and the letters from the front grew shorter. His signature became colder. His replies delayed, mechanical. He had believed victory would fix everything. He had believed time could be reclaimed. And time had answered him with silence. The next morning, he awoke to the scent of boiling herbs. He followed the smell to the remains of a temple garden, overgrown but alive. Sian stood there in the golden light, her sleeves rolled, mortar and pestle in hand. Her movements were steady, but there was tension in her shoulders, an awareness of his presence without acknowledgement. He approached cautiously. "You still use the temple's garden?" he asked softly. She didn't look at him. "It grows what I need. Lavender for calming fever, yarrow for wounds, angelica root for the cough. The earth doesn't care about curses. It just wants to grow." He nodded, unsure of what to say. "I used to dream of you here," she added, voice almost a whisper. "But in the dreams you came with light behind you, not shadow." "I didn't come for pity," he said, "or forgiveness." "Then why?" She turned to him suddenly, eyes fierce. "Why now, Dae-hyun? What do you expect to find here?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe just a chance to stand before you and say I was wrong." She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. You left me when I was carrying your children. You knew and still you left. I thought I was protecting our future, he said. I thought I needed to become something great. For them. For you. We didn't need greatness, she snapped. We needed you. Her hands trembled slightly, the pestle clattering against the bowl. She dropped it, took a breath, and sat down on the stone ledge, tired. There were nights, she said, softer now, when I could still feel you beside me. I would turn in the dark and whisper your name. But there was only cold. He sat opposite her, the weight in his chest nearly unbearable. Did you love him? He asked. The man who helped you escape? She looked away but didn't lie. He was kind. He stayed when others fled. He protected me. He never asked for anything in return. Did he raise them? Cian shook her head. No. He died protecting us before the sickness reached the gates. He was gone before they could even remember his face. Silence stretched between them like a canyon. I failed you, Daehyun said at last. Not once, but over and over. But I want to make things right. Even if you never love me again. Let me at least protect what's left. She looked at him then, not with warmth but not with hatred either. It was a look of deep, ancient weariness. They adore you already, she murmured. I don't know if I can take that from them, but I also don't know if I can let them believe in something that might break again. I won't leave, he said with quiet finality. Not this time, even if I have to sleep in ruins and earn every moment. She stood, her voice hoarse. We'll see if the city allows it. As she walked away, he realized the truth. Vulharis was not the only thing that had become a ghost of its former self. So had she. So had he. He should have felt peace. He had found them, his children, Cian. But instead, a restlessness clawed inside him. The city was watching. That was how it felt. Like every stone he'd once walked on, every wall he'd helped build, was waiting to judge him. He heard footsteps, small, quick. Hanul. The boy appeared from behind a crumbled archway, clutching something in his hand. You're awake, he said, walking over. I thought maybe you left. Daehyun shook his head. No, I said I wouldn't. The boy looked relieved, then sat beside him, holding out a folded parchment. What's this? Daehyun asked. A map, Hanul replied proudly. I made it. Mama says maps keep us from getting lost. This one shows the safe tunnels, where we hide when soldiers come. Daehyun unfolded it slowly. Crude lines marked familiar streets, with excess and circles drawn in charcoal. One tunnel led to the old aqueducts, another to the herbalist's cellar. One path was marked with a skull. What's this one? Don't go there, the boy whispered. That's where the others live, the ones who lost too much. Mama says they're not bad, just angry. A cold sensation crept into Daehyun's chest. There are more people here? He asked, stunned. Survivors. Hanul nodded solemnly. Not many. They stay underground. Some think the city's cursed. They say it's your fault. The words landed heavy. Daehyun folded the map carefully and placed it beside him. And what do you think? He asked, his voice low. I don't know, the boy said truthfully. But Mama said you built this place once. So maybe you can fix it. Daehyun looked at him. This small child with wide, wondering eyes, and something in him cracked open. Not from pain, but from the faintest flicker of hope. I want to, he said. More than anything. The boy smiled, then hesitated. There's something else, Hanul said. Some men came 2 nights ago. They didn't see us. But they had torches, and one of them said they were looking for gold. Daehyun tensed. Gold. Treasure, he said. In the vaults under the council hall. Daehyun's heart sank. The vaults still existed. He had sealed them himself before the war, locking away the city's emergency treasury, the last of the grain, coin, and healing supplies. If word had gotten out that they were still intact. They'll come back, Hanul said. Mama said we should be ready. Daehyun placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Thank you for telling me. He stood, determination tightening his spine. Go wake your sister. Take her to the cellar. Don't come out until I say it's safe. But what about you? Hanul asked, eyes wide. I'm not going anywhere, he said. I have something to protect now. Hanul ran off into the darkness, and Daehyun turned toward the broken gates. The cold wind that swept and carried more than chill. It carried the scent of iron, fire, and danger. It didn't take long. Torches appeared in the distance. First 2, then 5. Men in mismatched armor with rough voices and sharper blades. Mercenaries by the look of them, the kind drawn by rumors and greed. Their laughter was hollow, their words cruel. We search the council vaults by sunrise, one barked. If anyone's hiding, smoke him out. I want that gold. Daehyun stepped from the shadows, his voice clear and sharp. You'll find nothing but bones here. The men turned. One of them scoffed. And who in the hells are you? Daehyun stood tall. This is my city. Laughter. You're mad, old man. I was once its lord, Daehyun said. And I'll bury anyone who tries to desecrate it further. The leader stepped forward, unimpressed. We don't care about your ghosts. Move aside. But Daehyun did not move. The mercenary drew his blade. And then, suddenly, a sound pierced the air, loud, sharp, shrill. From the tower above, a bell rang once. Then again. The bell of Vulharis. No one had heard it in years. The sound shook the stones, called life back into the silence. Shadows moved. Figures began to appear. Survivors, cloaked in darkness, drawn by the sound. Eyes emerged from alleyways, shapes from cellars. Some carried pitchforks, others broken axes. One had a torch, another a staff made from shattered wood. The people of Vulharis. Daehyun didn't turn to them. He kept his gaze locked on the mercenaries. You wanted gold, he said. But what you'll find is a city that remembers, and a people who have nothing left to lose. The mercenaries hesitated. Then one cursed under his breath. Fall back, their leader snapped. It's not worth this. They retreated, torches disappearing into the fog, chased by the sound of the bell. When the last of them vanished, the survivors stood still, waiting. And then, a figure stepped forward. Sian. She looked at him, breathing hard. You called them. I rang the bell, he replied. But they answered. Her eyes softened just barely. You're not the man who left, she said. I'm trying not to be. A pause. Then a whisper from behind. Hanul's voice. Mama. Is he really our father? Sian closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, her voice shook. Yes, she said. He is. And just like that, something fragile passed between them. Something unnamed, but real. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Sian turned to them, her hands trembling just slightly. It's safe, she said. For now. The crowd slowly began to disperse, melting back into the shadows, as if the light had exposed too much. Trust wasn't reborn in a night. It had to be coaxed, shaped, earned. Daehyun stood where he was, staring into the spot where the mercenaries had disappeared. He didn't feel victorious. He felt humbled. These people had lived with nothing. No walls, no protection, no leader. Yet they had survived. Without him, he turned to Sian. You saved them. Her eyes lingered on the ruined bell tower. They saved each other. There was silence for a long while. Then she began to walk. Without a word, he followed her, down narrow alleys choked with ivy, past buildings that had become skeletons. Finally, they reached what was once the city infirmary. The roof was mostly intact, and firelight glowed from within. Inside, the scent of herbs and ash clung to the walls. Bundles of dried plants hung from rafters. Bedrolls were laid out along the floor, each one cradling someone sick or wounded. A girl coughed softly in the corner, her body wrapped in threadbare cloth. A boy stirred restlessly in his sleep, a fevered flush on his cheeks. Daehyun looked around in disbelief. You've kept this running? I did what I could, she said, washing her hands in a basin. Not enough. Never enough. But I couldn't leave them. Not when I knew what was coming. He stepped toward one of the beds, where a man lay breathing heavily. His skin was pale, and dark veins stretched down his arms. Dae-hyun reached out instinctively, but Seon caught his wrist. "Don't touch him," she said sharply. "Not until I've changed his wrappings." He froze. She knelt beside the man, carefully peeling back stained cloth to reveal an angry wound festering with infection. Her jaw tightened, but her hands were steady. "I don't know what's causing it," she muttered. "It's not the plague. It's something else. Slower. It eats from the inside." Dae-hyun watched her in silence. The way her brow furrowed, the precision in her fingers. He remembered those hands, once soft, once tracing lazy circles against his chest beneath morning light. Now they were calloused, tired, and stronger than he had ever imagined. "You shouldn't have had to carry all this alone," he said, his voice barely audible. She didn't look at him. "But I did." He lowered his gaze. A small cry interrupted them. Era, standing in the doorway, barefoot, clutching a blanket. "Mama?" she whispered. "Is it morning yet?" "Not yet, my love," Seon said, her voice gentle. Era's eyes found Dae-hyun in the dim light. She padded over to him, blinking sleepily. "Are you leaving again?" He knelt to her level slowly. "No," he said. "I'm staying. Even if the bad men come back? Especially then." She wrapped her small arms around his neck. He froze for a moment, startled by the sudden warmth of her touch. Then carefully he held her back. Seon watched in silence, her face unreadable. Later, when the infirmary had grown quiet, she stood outside by the old well, staring up at the stars. Dae-hyun joined her, though she didn't speak. They stood side by side in the silence of the ruined city, the night vast and still around them. "I thought about you every day," he said softly. She gave a bitter laugh. "So did I. I never stopped loving you." She turned to him slowly. "Love is easy to say after the damage is done." "I know. That's why I'm not asking for it. I needed you to know." Her voice cracked. "Do you know what it was like? Carrying them alone? Feeling them grow inside me, while everything around us fell apart." "I failed you," he said. "Yes, you did." He nodded, accepting the blade of her truth. "And yet you lived. You protected them. You gave them hope when I gave nothing. Seon, you became everything I was too blind to be." She looked at him, truly looked, and her eyes filled with something he hadn't seen before. Not anger, not love, but grief. "You can't change what happened." "No," he said, "but I can try to change what happens next." A long silence stretched between them. Then finally she looked away. "There are rumors," she said, "of others who know the city still has stores of medicine. They'll come like those mercenaries, desperate, dangerous. If you really mean to stay, you'll have to choose who you are this time. Not as a lord, not as a name, but as a man." He stepped closer. "Then let me start as one." She didn't move away, and for the first time in all those years the space between them didn't feel unreachable. Era's tiny fingers clutched the edge of her doll, its head made from linen and its body from scraps of old robes. Hanul slept beside her, one arm flung protectively over her chest, the same way Dae-hyun used to sleep beside his younger brother during cold winters long ago. He watched them in silence. He should have felt pride, but all he felt was fear. Seon's voice echoed from earlier. "They think you're their father. Think." The word lingered, sharp and unrelenting. He left the infirmary and wandered into the adjoining chamber where broken statues of old healers lined the walls. He remembered commissioning them years ago when he'd believed a legacy could be carved in stone. Now they stared back at him with cracked eyes and hollow faces. He pressed his hands to the edge of the marble altar and lowered his head. The silence was broken only by the sound of footsteps. Light, deliberate. Seon entered behind him. "I wondered where you'd gone," she said softly. He didn't turn. "I couldn't sleep." "Neither could I." The silence returned, but it wasn't empty. Pulsed between them. Finally he said it. "You said, They think I'm their father. She didn't answer right away. I need to know, Cian. Are they? He turned to face her then, and what he saw stopped him. She wasn't angry. She wasn't cold. She looked afraid. I didn't lie to them, she said quietly. Not once. But I didn't tell them the whole truth either, because I didn't know how. He took a step closer. Tell me now. Her eyes filled with something distant, raw. When you left, I was already carrying them. I sent word. I wrote every moon cycle, but your replies were fewer, shorter, until they stopped. I never meant to. I know, she interrupted. I know, but I stopped waiting after the 6th moon. I was sick with worry, with grief, and then the gates were closed, and the sickness came, and we were trapped. He could see it in her eyes, those endless days of fear, of isolation, of facing labor alone, not knowing if he'd live or die or if he even cared anymore. I gave birth in the old wine cellar, she whispered. Alone. The twins came early. I nearly died. He closed his eyes, but the guilt wouldn't disappear. There was a healer, an old man who found me hours after. He brought water, cut the cords. He held my hand when I bled. Daehyun opened his eyes slowly. Did he? No, she said. He didn't stay long. He left before the sickness grew. He didn't make it through the winter. Then why? His voice cracked. Why the doubt? She looked at him long, steady. Because, I don't know anymore. I wanted to believe they were yours. I told myself they were. But after so much time, after the silence, after the fear, I let the doubt grow. I was angry, and I didn't want to need you. Her voice broke then, fragile and shaking. I hated how much I still loved you. I hated that I looked into their faces and saw you, because it reminded me of the man who left. Tears welled in his eyes. I was that man, he admitted. But I'm not anymore. She stepped forward, close enough to touch, but didn't. They call you Appa, she whispered, and they mean it. That bond, they built it without knowing, without facts, without names. He let out a trembling breath. And if I'm not their father by blood? She searched his face, her voice like paper tearing. Then earn it with every breath from this day forward. He nodded slowly, the weight of her words falling on him like snow, soft, cold, undeniable. I will, he said. She looked down, then back up, blinking back tears. They already love you. Don't make them regret it. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. For a moment, their fingers simply rested together, unsure, but real. And in that quiet space between broken walls and sleeping children, something shifted. Not resolution. Daehyun sat on the edge of an old stone balcony, overlooking what had once been the noble quarter. Below him, moss had claimed the marble courtyards, and the statues of long-dead lords lay toppled and cracked. His cloak was wrapped tightly around his shoulders, but the cold inside him was older than the wind. He hadn't slept. His thoughts circled one truth. He had returned, but return did not mean belonging. Behind him, he heard the creak of footsteps. Light, familiar. Cian. She didn't speak at first. She came to stand beside him, silent as the dawn. They talk about you, you know, she said at last, voice quiet. The ones hiding in the tunnels. Some remember the festivals you held. Others remember the taxes. Daehyun let out a humorless breath. I remember both. She leaned on the stone railing beside him. Some say you abandoned us. Others say you were betrayed. I never knew what to believe. I abandoned you, he said without hesitation. There's no excuse. I told myself it was for the good of the city, for the future. But really it was fear. I couldn't face the weight of what I had. I thought I had more time, more chances. She looked at him but said nothing. I thought greatness would be enough, he continued. That if I returned with glory, it would fix everything. That you'd still be waiting. That nothing would have changed. It all changed, she whispered. Every piece of it. He turned to her slowly. Do they still see me as the man who left? They see a man carrying too much shame to run away again, she said. That's something. He looked back at the city. I keep wondering, if I'd stayed, would it have made a difference? Yes, she said without hesitation. The word struck him like a stone to the chest. You would have died with us, she added softly. Maybe that's what hurts more. His jaw tightened. And instead I lived. I wore silk while this city burned. You wore armor, she corrected. And I don't think you slept for a single night with peace. No, he murmured. I didn't. A pause hung between them, thick with all that had never been said. Last night, she said carefully, when Era asked if you were leaving again. Do you know what scared me most? He looked at her. What? That for a moment, I didn't know the answer. Her voice broke slightly, and that I wanted to believe you'd stay. But part of me was afraid to hope. He reached out then, not to grab her hand, but to place his fingers gently against hers on the railing, just barely touching. She didn't move away. I don't know how to undo the past, he said, but I can carry it with you if you let me. Every wound, every grave, every broken promise. She looked down at their hands, their fingers barely touching, and the breath she let out was trembling. You'll have to carry more than that, she whispered. Just then, a voice called from below. Appa! Appa! Come quick! It was Hanul, his voice high with urgency. Daehyun and Seon rushed down the cracked stairs, their feet echoing against the stone. Outside, Era stood near the garden wall, pointing toward the trees. There's someone out there, she cried. We saw them moving, by the old orchard. Daehyun squinted toward the horizon. The shadows between the trees shifted, too large to be animals. Seon's voice dropped low. It's too soon. They're back already. Daehyun turned to her. Get the children inside. Lock the infirmary. And you? She asked, her voice sharp with fear. I'll find out who they are. No, don't do this alone. But he was already moving. His heart thudded in his chest, not with fear, but with something colder, resolve. He moved fast across the field, stepping over broken fences and through tall grass, until he reached the orchard. The trees were gnarled and dead, branches like skeletal hands. He paused at the edge, scanning. A movement there. He crept forward, and then voices. Male. 2, maybe 3. Not much left here, one said. But the girl said there was silver, maybe even medicine. Too quiet, the other muttered. I don't like it. Daehyun stepped from the trees. You lost. The men turned, startled. One of them reached for a dagger. Daehyun didn't flinch. This city doesn't welcome strangers. The taller one smirked. It didn't look very occupied. It is now. The shorter man scoffed. You don't look like much of a guard. I'm not, Daehyun said. I'm the reason this city still has breath. You threatening us, old man? Daehyun didn't speak. He simply took a step forward, his eyes locked with theirs. I'm offering you a choice, he said. Turn back, or stay, and become a story the ruins will forget. For a moment, it hung in the air, 2 blades of fate. Then, with a low curse, the men backed off. This place isn't worth dying over, one muttered. They melted back into the woods. Daehyun stood still until the wind swallowed the last sound of their retreat. Then he exhaled, shaky, but unbroken. As he turned to head back, he saw Seon watching him from the distance. Her arms crossed tight over her chest, her eyes unreadable. He didn't wave, didn't smile. He simply walked back toward her, toward the city, toward whatever came next, because he had made his choice. He would carry the weight, the pain, the truth. Daehyun stood near the doorway, watching the storm. Every drop felt like it was washing something from his skin, something old, something buried. He hadn't spoken much since the encounter in the orchard. He had driven them away, yes, but he knew more would come, and each time, it would take more to stop them. Behind him, Seon lit a candle on the edge of a wooden shelf, her movements slow, distracted. She had barely spoken to him since his return from the trees. Not out of anger, but something deeper, something heavier. She was pulling into herself. The candle's flame flickered violently. "You're quiet," Daehyun said finally, not turning around. She replied after a moment, her voice low. "I found something today, in the old apothecary." That drew his attention. He turned, brows furrowed. "What did you find?" She pulled a folded, brittle page from the pocket of her cloak and handed it to him. It was damp but legible, written in neat, delicate script, her own. He recognized the handwriting before he even began to read. "Your journal." She nodded. "One of them. I didn't know it survived. It was hidden in a wall cabinet." He unfolded the page carefully, eyes scanning the words. His own name was written there several times. Fragments of thoughts, desperation, fear. "The children keep asking when he'll return. I tell them stories of the war, of his bravery. But I no longer believe in those stories myself. I watched the city crumble with his name still in my mouth." He stopped reading. "I wrote those words in the dark," she said, "when I still believed you were dead, or had simply chosen never to come back." Daehyun folded the paper slowly, his voice quiet. "You shouldn't have had to carry that." "I did," she said. "Every day, every night. I buried hope piece by piece until I was nothing but ash walking on legs." He stepped closer. "I didn't come to reopen those wounds." "No," she said, lifting her gaze to his. "But your presence makes them bleed again. And I don't know if that's a curse or a blessing." Thunder rolled overhead. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then, he reached into his tunic and pulled something out. A leather pouch, weathered, tied with a frayed cord. He placed it in her hands. "What is this?" she asked, wary. "Something I couldn't give you before," he said. "Not when I thought I still had all the time in the world." She opened the pouch. Inside were torn letters, pieces of parchment, stained, creased. Some of them bore the seal of the royal crest. Others were written in his hand, unsent. Dozens. She pulled one out. The ink was faded, but readable. "Sian, I saw your face in a dream tonight. You were holding a child, was it ours? I hope so. I hope I still matter. I don't know what's left of me now. I'm cold in ways I don't have words for." Her hand trembled slightly as she put it back in the pouch. "You wrote to me," she whispered. "Every time I set up camp," he said. "Every time I felt the weight of what I'd lost. I wrote, but I never sent them. I was ashamed." A tear escaped her eye, but she wiped it away quickly. "You should have sent them." "I know. I might have waited longer. I know," he repeated, his voice breaking. They stood there, the weight of 1,000 unsent words between them. Then she did something he didn't expect. She pressed the pouch to her chest. "You weren't there when I needed you," she said. "But this tells me that part of you tried to be." He looked at her then, truly looked, and for the first time she wasn't a ghost of the past. She was real, tired, resilient, fierce, and she still held pieces of him that he had thought were lost. "I want to help you now," he said. "Not as a lord, not even as the man you once loved, but as someone who refuses to fail again." Her voice was quiet, but steady. "Then listen to what I'm about to say." He nodded. She turned toward the infirmary wall where she had pinned an old map of Vulharis. Her fingers hovered over 3 marked points. "These are wells," she explained, "sealed during the outbreak. But beneath them lies something worse." He stepped closer. "Worse than the plague? They were poisoned," she said, deliberately, by someone who knew the city. It wasn't the plague that killed Vulharis, Daehyun. It was betrayal. He stared at her, disbelief rippling through him. "Who?" She met his eyes, and there was steel in her gaze. "I don't know yet, but someone gave access to our inner stores." The water turned black, and the children, they were the first to fall. Daehyun's breath caught. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because I wasn't sure I could trust you," she said simply. "But if you're really here to help, then we start with the truth. We dig into the rot that killed our home." The rain continued to fall, relentless, whispering against the window panes. Daehyun clenched his fists. "Then show me," he said. "We'll uncover it together." And in the silence that followed, something else settled in the room. Not grief, not love, but purpose. Sian was beside him, holding a bundle of old parchment. Records, faded and crumbling, from the days before the city fell. She unrolled them carefully, revealing a crude sketch of the water system beneath the city. Thin ink lines stretched like veins, and 3 wells were circled in red. This was one of them. "They were sealed before the sickness began," she said. It was quiet. No announcement, no explanation, just boarded shut. Daehyun crouched near the rim. The wood that sealed the shaft was blackened, not just from age but from fire. The boards had been nailed down and tarred over. Someone wanted this shut permanently. He looked up at her. "Do you have the key?" She nodded and handed him an iron ring. "I found it in the old steward's quarters 2 years ago. I never had the courage to open it." He took the key, fingers closing around the cold iron. "And now, I've lived with too many questions," she whispered. "It's time to find out what we buried." He slid the key into the rusted lock and turned. It groaned like a dying creature, and for a moment he thought it would snap. Then, with a loud clack, the lock broke free. He pulled away the boards one by one, until the opening lay bare beneath them. A foul odor escaped, not the dry scent of old water, but something heavier, metallic, rotten. Sian stepped back, covering her mouth. Daehyun peered into the darkness. "We'll need light," he said. Together they returned with torches, ropes, and cloths tied over their faces. When they returned, Hanul and Era had followed at a distance, their eyes wide with curiosity. "Stay back," Sian warned. "This isn't for children." "But we want to help," Era insisted, clutching the hem of her mother's cloak. Daehyun crouched to her level. "You are helping," he said gently, "by staying safe. When the time comes to rebuild, you'll be the ones who lead us. But for now, let us go where it's still dangerous." Era nodded slowly, though she didn't look away until he promised with his eyes that he would return. Rope tied securely, torch in hand, Daehyun descended into the shaft. The walls were damp, the air thick with a sharp, choking stench that burned the back of his throat. Water dripped somewhere far below. When his boots touched stone, he found himself in a narrow tunnel lined with moss-covered bricks. He waited as Sian descended behind him, her movements careful, deliberate. The tunnel stretched into blackness. They walked slowly, torches held high, their steps echoing like whispers of the dead. After what felt like hours, they reached a chamber. Daehyun raised his torch and froze. Dozens of barrels, crates, sealed jars with wax-marked tops, food rations, medicines, the city's emergency stockpile, everything that was supposed to have been distributed during the outbreak. Sian's hand trembled as she stepped forward, brushing dust from a label. "Healing tincture, fever reducing. These could have saved lives," she whispered, her voice cracking. "These could have saved children." Daehyun's eyes scanned the room. One crate sat apart from the others, smaller, iron-bound. He opened it. Inside were vials, thin glass tubes filled with liquid black as ink. He lifted one carefully, holding it to the torchlight. "This isn't medicine," he said, voice low. "This is venom." Sian stared. "You're sure?" "I've seen it before, in the Eastern campaigns, used by spies to contaminate wells. Just a few drops in a reservoir, and an entire garrison could fall." He set the vial down carefully, his voice tightening. "This was no accident. Someone brought this here. Someone poured this into the city's water." "But why?" Sian asked, her voice hollow. Daehyun turned slowly, scanning the chamber again. In the far corner, a small chest had been pried open. Inside, documents, letters. He picked one up and read, heart pounding. "To the Honorable Counselor Myung, as agreed, once the water supply is tainted and the population weakened, your men will move in. The city will fall without resistance. Your gold has been delivered, and the Eastern Pass has been cleared for your arrival." The signature at the bottom froze his blood. Lord Sangael, his former advisor, his closest confidant. He staggered back, the paper trembling in his hand. "No," he breathed. "He wouldn't. I trusted him." Cian read the letter beside him, and her face turned to stone. "He did this," she whispered. "He sold us for coin. He watched our children die and paid for the poison." Daehyun turned away, his stomach twisting. "I put him in charge. When I left for war, I gave him power. I gave him my seal. You didn't know. But I should have," he snapped, his voice raw. He spoke of control, efficiency, order. And I listened, because I thought the city needed someone colder than me. He dropped to his knees, the paper falling from his hand. Cian knelt beside him. "He betrayed us," she said. "But you didn't." He looked up, his eyes hollow. "Didn't I?" She didn't answer, not with words. Instead, she reached out and placed her hand gently over his. "For years I blamed you," she said. "I wrapped my grief around your name and made it my shield. But today, I see something else." "What do you see?" She met his eyes. "A man who's willing to descend into the dark, just to bring back truth." He held her gaze for a long time, and in that chamber full of decay and betrayal, something else began to form, quiet, slow, but undeniable. Not redemption, not yet, but the first step toward it. Above them, the storm continued to rage. He hadn't spoken since they returned from the underground chamber. Not when Cian had treated the cuts on his hands. Not when the children had asked why he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Not even when the others in hiding, the frail, the sick, the old, came one by one to tell him what had been taken from them. He stood now where his throne used to be, though he had never thought of it as a throne. A tall-backed chair of cedar and iron, now cracked in half, overgrown with moss. Around him, the echoes of meetings long past clung to the stones. Voices, promises, decrees, lies. Cian entered quietly, her cloak still wet from the rain. She had brought with her a satchel filled with more letters, gathered from the archives below the infirmary. "You were right," she said softly. "There's more. Dozens. Some signed, some coded." He wasn't acting alone. Daehyun didn't move. "He sold us out," he murmured almost to himself, "to the Eastern lords. Promised them a city ready for the taking. Poisoned the wells to weaken us. And when I returned from war, there was no one left to fight." Cian's eyes darkened. "He knew you'd be gone. He planned it around your absence. He knew you'd trust him." His jaw clenched. "He used my seal. My name signed the shipment that brought in the barrels. I left the city in his hands. I left you in his hands." She walked toward him, laying the satchel gently on the remains of the table. "You couldn't have known. But I should have," he snapped, finally looking at her. "I should have seen him. I should have stayed. Gods, I had warning signs, his ambition, the way he spoke of the common folk like numbers, not people. I heard it, and I looked the other way." Cian studied him quietly. "You see it now. It's too late. For some things," she said, "but not all." He ran a hand through his hair, damp and shaking with rage. "We need to find him. If he's alive." "I already sent word through the safe pass," she said. "A messenger on foot. There are still allies in the north. Old names that still honor yours, whether you believe it or not." He exhaled slowly, his voice hoarse. "Do you?" She looked at him for a long, silent moment. The rain drummed against the roof above. "I believe you're not the man who left," she said. "But I don't know who you are yet. I'm still watching, waiting." "That's fair," he whispered. She stepped closer, and her voice softened. "But I see someone who's standing in the ruins and not turning away. Someone who didn't leave again, not even after seeing what this place became." He looked down at his hands. They were calloused, dirty, stained with ink and ash. Not the hands of a lord. Not anymore. "People won't forgive easily," he said. "They're not supposed to," she replied. "You don't rebuild trust with words. You build it brick by brick. Like a wall." He nodded. Outside, a shout echoed from the outer streets. Urgent, distant. Dae-hyun turned toward the sound. He ran from the chamber, Seon close behind him. They moved through the wet corridors, splashing through shallow puddles, hearts pounding. Near the eastern gate, a crowd had gathered. Survivors, ragged and pale, stood in a semicircle around two figures bound with rope. One of them was on his knees, head bowed. The other spat curses, fighting against his bonds. Dae-hyun pushed through the circle and froze. It was Counselor Myung, the second man in the letters, and beside him, a younger figure, barely a man, slender, hooded, but something in his posture, defiant, familiar, made Dae-hyun step forward. He pulled the hood back. The boy lifted his face, and Dae-hyun's heart stopped. It was Sang-il's son. The resemblance was unmistakable, the same cold eyes, the same angular jaw, but young, so young. "You," Dae-hyun whispered. The boy stared at him. "You're the one who left us all to die." The words hit like a blade. Seon stepped forward. They were caught near the old barracks, looking for something. Dae-hyun looked at the crowd, then back at the boy. "Why are you here?" he asked. "We came to finish what our fathers started," the boy said. "My father believed this city was weak, a rotting jewel. He said it needed to be broken to be remade." "And you believed him?" "I believed in survival," the boy hissed. "You ruled from towers. We lived in tunnels. While you were gone, he taught us how to take power back." Dae-hyun looked at Counselor Myung, who said nothing. His lips were bloodied, his eyes swollen, but he looked back without remorse. "You betrayed your people," Dae-hyun said coldly. "We followed a stronger leader," Myung rasped. "You led with dreams. He led with results. And killed thousands. We saved hundreds more." Seon stepped between them. "This isn't justice. This is deflection. We have the letters, the evidence, the poison. Bring them to trial." Dae-hyun looked at her, something tightening in his chest. "No," he said. "Not a trial. Not behind closed doors. The people will see. Everything. The truth must be laid bare, or Volharis will never breathe again." And in that moment, a spark lit behind his eyes. Not vengeance. Not pride. But fire. Expectation. In the center, two figures knelt beneath the cracked statue of the founding queen. Counselor Myung's face was swollen. His lips split from the skirmish earlier. He stared down, saying nothing. Beside him, Sang-il's son kept his head high, eyes unflinching, like his father once had when delivering orders that cost others everything. Dae-hyun stood before them, not on a platform, but level with the people. No armor, no emblem, just a man with truth in his hand. He held up the bundle of letters, witness accounts, poisoned inventories, signed orders sealed with wax once bearing his own crest. "You've lived in silence," he said, his voice steady but raw, "buried under ash and betrayal. And for years you believed it was plague or divine punishment or chance that took your children, your homes, your lives." The crowd murmured. Some wept. Others held each other tightly, as if afraid this truth might collapse them too. "But it was not fate," Dae-hyun continued. "It was choice. It was men you trusted, men I trusted, who decided your lives were a price worth paying for gold and power." He looked down at Counselor Myung, whose eyes flickered, just once, with something like shame. "I gave him authority," Dae-hyun said to the people, "and for that I am to blame." He turned to the boy, who stared back, defiantly silent. "You knew what your father did," Dae-hyun said. "You came back to finish his work. I came back to survive." The boy spat. "You think these people care about justice? They care about food, about not dying in the dirt. My father gave them a future. You gave them speeches." A tense silence followed. Seon stepped forward from the crowd, her voice low, unwavering. "Your father gave us poison. He gave us strength." The boy shot back. "More than your lord ever did." Dae-hyun stepped closer, and though his voice didn't rise, the intensity in his tone pierced the stillness. "Strength built on blood isn't strength. It's rot." The boy looked away, his jaw tight. Dae-hyun faced the people again. I won't execute them in secret. I won't hide the truth like I did in the past. I ask you, what should justice look like for Vulharis? For every child buried, for every name etched into rubble. Voices rose. Some shouted for death, others for exile. But more than anything, they cried for peace, for closure. Xian placed a hand gently on Daehyun's arm. You already started burning the disease out, she whispered. But leave vengeance behind. Let this city rebuild without more blood. He looked at her, eyes tired. And if we let them live, we show the world that we are not what they made us, she replied. He turned back to the boy and counselor Myung. You will face judgment, not with fire, but with truth. You will tell your story to the north, to the east, to every region that still fears Vulharis. You will speak the names of the dead in every hall where your father's lies still echo. Myung scoffed. You think we'll be believed? You won't be alone, Daehyun said coldly. I'll stand beside you. I'll carry my shame with yours. And the world will know the whole of it, what we destroyed and what we're trying to rebuild. The boy's defiance faltered for the first time. His lips parted, but no words came. The storm had passed, but the wind still carried whispers. From the crowd, an old man stepped forward, eyes dimmed by time, but clear with sorrow. My daughter died 2 nights after the water changed, he said, voice rough. She was 6. The boy couldn't meet his eyes. The man's voice cracked. I've dreamed of choking the man who let it happen. But I see now, death won't give her back. Truth might. He turned away and limped back into the crowd, silence trailing behind him like a prayer. Daehyun raised his voice once more. We cannot undo what was done. But from this day forward, we will not live in shadows. He motioned for the guards to pull the prisoners to their feet. They will answer to every village, every graveyard, until the story of Vulharis is no longer one of silence, but of reckoning. As the crowd slowly dispersed, lanterns still burning above them, Xian stood quietly at Daehyun's side. She looked up at him, her voice nearly lost in the wind. You didn't seek revenge. He nodded. I've seen enough of it to know it only builds more ruins. She reached into her pocket and pulled something small. A locket, old, worn. She pressed it into his hand. I found this after you left for war. I wore it for a while. Then I buried it beneath the temple floor. He opened it. Inside was a painting, small, delicate brushwork, of her, smiling, and next to her, space left blank, for someone who never returned. I want you to have it again, she said. His hand closed around it slowly, the weight of it heavier than it seemed. You're not done yet, she added, but you're no longer the man I buried. And for the first time in years, something gentle stirred behind her eyes. Forgiveness? No. Daehyun stood in the dark of his quarters. Once the war room, now stripped of its maps and titles. Outside, the rain had returned in soft sheets. The city was asleep, but he wasn't. His fingers traced the edges of the locket again and again, unable to let it go. It was a symbol of her faith buried then unearthed, of who he had been, and who he still feared he could become. A soft knock came at the door. He turned. Come in. It was Hanul. The boy stepped inside, barefoot, eyes wide with questions he hadn't dared to voice. You're not sleeping either, Daehyun said gently. Hanul shook his head. Mama cries sometimes. When she thinks we can't hear. Daehyun's heart twisted. She says the wind sounds like the ones we lost. Is that true? He crouched, meeting the boy's gaze. I think, when you lose someone, the world finds ways to speak to you. Sometimes through wind, sometimes through silence. Hanul fidgeted, then pulled something from his sleeve. A drawing. Rough charcoal strokes, but clear. 2 children, himself and Era. And between them a man. Strong, tall, with a cloak like fire and arms holding them close. It's you, Hanul said. I drew this last winter. I didn't know what you looked like, but Mama said you had kind eyes. So I imagined. Daehyun stared at the paper, his throat tightening. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner, he said. You're here now, Hanul replied. Mama says people break, but sometimes they come back different. Better. He reached forward, gently placing the drawing into Daehyun's hands. I think you're the same. Just not finished yet. The boy left the room before Daehyun could speak, and for a long time, he simply stared at the drawing. And then he wept. Quiet, aching tears that didn't seek forgiveness, only release. By morning, the sky had cleared. The sunlight spilled over Vulharis like a promise. The infirmary was busy again. Too many to treat, not enough hands. Daehyun had taken to lifting barrels, repairing broken benches, chopping firewood. The people didn't speak to him much, not yet. But they nodded. They made space for him. And that was something. Sean emerged from the inner chamber, sleeves rolled to her elbows, her hair braided tight. There was ash on her face and blood on her apron. But her steps were steady. He met her outside the doorway. You've been up all night, he said. So have you. He offered her the locket again, but she shook her head. You're carrying it now. Let it remind you. I don't need reminders, he said softly. I see it in every stone, every pair of eyes. She studied him a moment, then nodded once. Good. Then maybe we can start planning for what comes next. There's something I've been thinking about, he said. The children, the survivors, they need food, trade, connection. But more than that, they need a reason to believe this city can stand again. You have an idea? She asked, cautious. He glanced toward the old chapel tower, its bell silent since that night. A gathering, he said. A day of remembrance. No titles, no politics, just a gathering of names and voices. Let them speak their grief aloud. Let us own it together. Sean looked at him, truly looked, and something shifted behind her expression. You're not just rebuilding stone, she said. No, he replied. I'm rebuilding faith. That night, under torchlight and moon, the people gathered in the plaza. No decrees, no ceremonies, just voices, one by one, standing before the broken statue of the queen. My sister's name was Ga, a girl said, holding a doll. She died waiting for a doctor who never came. My father gave his last food to a stranger, an old woman whispered. He told me kindness mattered more than survival. I hated him for that. Now I understand. A boy stepped forward. My mother carried me on her back when the wells turned black. She sang even when she was dying. I still remember her song. And then Sean spoke. My son and daughter were born into a city already dying. I feared they wouldn't see a single spring. But they did. Because we fought. Because we remembered. She looked at Daehyun. And because one man came back. Not to save us, but to carry the weight with us. Daehyun stepped forward, his voice hoarse. I left you when I should have stayed, and I cannot erase that. But if you'll let me, I will walk with you every step forward. Not as your lord, but as your equal. No applause, no cheer, just silence. And then one voice, soft, from the back. I believe you. Then another. We believe you. And slowly, like dawn breaking through cloud, the air filled with quiet affirmation. And for the first time since the fall, Vulharis exhaled. Daehyun stood near the old chapel tower, his hands clasped behind his back. The locket hung against his chest like a second heartbeat. He watched the courtyard below where Hanul and Era played with other children, laughing, among weeds and broken stones. Sean approached quietly. He felt her presence before he heard her. They're smiling again, she said softly. I almost forgot what that looked like. He nodded. It makes me afraid. Her brow furrowed. Why? Because we still don't know how long we can keep them safe. She stood beside him in silence, watching the children. There's something I haven't told you, she said after a moment, her voice lower now. About the man who saved me after you left. He turned to her slowly, unsure if he was ready for this. She continued anyway. His name was June. He was quiet, gentle. Not from Vulharis, not even from these lands. He came with traders one spring and stayed. When the gates closed, he stayed too. He didn't owe us anything, but he gave everything. Daehyun listened, his face unreadable. He helped with the birth, she went on, voice trembling now. When I was delirious, when I thought I was dying, he held my hand, sang to me in a language I didn't understand. Did you love him? Daehyun asked, barely able to form the words. Seon looked down. I wanted to. The honesty of that answer hit him harder than a lie ever could. I needed someone, she said, but even when I reached for him, my heart was still chasing a shadow. Yours. He turned away, swallowing the emotion rising in his throat. I'm not asking for guilt, she said, and I'm not confessing for your forgiveness. I want you to understand why I buried so much of myself after that. Why I stopped believing in second chances. Because even those who stayed, disappeared, he whispered. She nodded. June died during the first wave. No time to grieve. No time to bury him properly. And when the children asked where Appa was, I could barely keep my voice from breaking. Daehyun turned to her again, his eyes full of something deeper than pain. Gratitude, reverence, a kind of mourning for the pieces of her life he never got to hold. I'm sorry he died, he said. Truly, it sounds like he was everything I wasn't. She reached for his hand. But you're here now, she whispered, and I don't need a ghost. I need a man who'll walk through the fire with me. A long silence followed. Then a voice rang out from below. Appa, come see, Era called, waving wildly. We found something. They descended together, following the children past twisted roots and overgrown stone. Hanul pulled back a section of broken fencing, revealing a collapsed stairwell beneath the old wine cellar. It goes down deep, he said. We threw a rock, and it didn't hit the bottom. Daehyun crouched. The opening was narrow, slick with moss. It hadn't been touched in years. Seon paled slightly. That leads to the vaults. His head turned. The vaults? She nodded. During the siege, we hid what was left of the council's records down there. I sealed them myself. But I never had the strength to go back. He stood. Then maybe it's time we did. Later, with torches and rope, they descended. Daehyun first, Seon behind him. The air grew colder with each step, thick with mildew and the quiet pressure of forgotten years. The lower they went, the louder the silence became. Finally, they reached the stone floor of the vault. Dust choked the air. Shelves lined the walls, toppled scrolls and broken crates littering the floor. But one thing stood untouched. A steel-bound chest in the far corner. Daehyun stepped toward it, heart thudding. Seon joined him. I was told the city's founding records were kept here. Family lines, lineage documents, citizenship seals. He knelt before the chest, finding the old locking mechanism still intact. Do you remember the code? He asked. Seon hesitated, then closed her eyes. Yes. She knelt beside him, fingers steady despite the dust and time. 5 rotations, she murmured. 2 to the left, 1 back, then press. The lock clicked. Daehyun exhaled slowly, then opened the chest. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, were scrolls. Dozens of them, still sealed, still intact. He reached for one, marked with an unfamiliar crest. He unrolled it gently, and froze. His own name, Daehyun of House Sul, son of Jae-won and Mina. But beneath it, a second line, legally acknowledged as guardian and heirholder of the twins, Hanul and Era. Seon leaned over his shoulder. Her breath caught. This, he whispered. You filed this. You filed it before the city fell. I did, she said. I sent it with a courier before the plague took hold. I didn't think it survived. He looked at her, emotion threatening to crack his voice. You claimed me, even when I wasn't here. You still gave them my name. Her hand found his. I never stopped wanting them to have a father, she whispered. Even when I stopped waiting for the man who left. He folded the scroll gently, pressing it to his chest. And for the first time since he returned, he felt whole. Not because he had been forgiven, but because he had been chosen. Even in his absence, Even in the ruins, someone had believed in him. Xian sat nearby, her eyes cast downward, fingers tracing an old sigil carved into the wood. She hadn't spoken in a while. The silence wasn't heavy. It was waiting. "I don't know how to deserve this," Daehyun finally whispered, his voice thick, rough. "You wrote this when I was gone, when you didn't even know if I was alive." Her gaze didn't lift. "I didn't do it for you." He flinched, slightly. She looked at him then, eyes soft but unwavering. "I did it for them." He nodded slowly. "Of course. But," she added, voice catching like a torn thread, "a part of me hoped, just the smallest, most foolish part, that if you ever returned, you would want it to be true too." He stepped toward her, the quiet of the vault cocooning them in stillness. "I do," he said. "I want it more than anything." She gave a faint, tired smile. "Then make it true every day you breathe." He knelt in front of her, the torchlight flickering across his face. "I will. I swear to you, Xian, no more vanishing. No more running from the weight." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "You'll have to face more than weight. Truth still buried. Anger still raw." "I know." She studied him carefully. "You still want to find Sang-il?" His jaw tightened. "Yes, not for revenge. Not anymore. But the rot he planted didn't die with the water. There are still people out there who believe in what he built, who might return." Xian stood slowly. "Then we'll need allies." He looked up. "We?" She reached out, helping him to his feet. "You think you'll do this alone?" He smiled faintly, the exhaustion in his bones briefly overtaken by something warmer. Outside, the wind howled again, stronger now, like a warning. The next day, riders arrived. Not hostile, not armed for war, but cloaked in the dark green of the northern house banners. House Jirun, once allies to Volharis, long believed to have turned their back on the south. One of them dismounted with a grim expression, pulling back her hood. A woman, tall and stern, silver in her braid and cold wisdom in her eyes. "You are Lord Daehyun?" she asked. "I am. I bring word from the north. And a warning." Xian stepped beside him, tense. "What warning?" The rider handed Daehyun a sealed scroll, marked with the sigil of Sang-il's faction, burned at the edges, like something recovered from fire. He broke the seal. "Read." The words struck like stone. "He lives. He has regrouped. South of the Ironwood, near the old fort. They are gathering what remains of the mercenary clans. They believe Volharis is weak, and they intend to finish what they started." Daehyun's fingers curled around the scroll until the parchment crumpled. Xian's voice was steady, but sharp. "How long do we have?" The rider shook her head. "A fortnight at most." They move quietly, but not unseen. "He underestimated you once. He won't make that mistake again." Daehyun turned to Xian. "We need to prepare." She met his eyes. "Not just for defense, for survival." He nodded. "We'll gather those who still have strength, train the young, refortify the western wall, and..." He looked back at the children in the courtyard. "Evacuation routes. If we fall again, they must not fall with us." Xian touched his arm gently. "We won't fall." He looked at her, and this time he believed her. But the weight returned. Not the guilt, the responsibility, because a storm was coming. And this time he would not stand at the edge of it. Daehyun walked the western ramparts slowly, the wooden beams groaning beneath his boots. Below him, a handful of men and women practiced with spears made from repurposed farm tools. Their stances were unsure, their movements sloppy, but they moved with resolve. He tightened his cloak around his shoulders as the wind picked up, bringing with it the scent of old blood and rusted iron. "Your face changes when you look at them," said a voice behind him. He turned. "Xian." She leaned against the stone, arms crossed over her chest, her braids swaying with the wind. "You watch them like someone waiting for a storm to tear the roof off again." "I'm watching them like someone who once led thousands of trained soldiers," he said quietly, "and knows how quickly untrained ones can die." She stepped closer. "They don't have to be soldiers. Just survivors who've decided they won't run this time. They'll still bleed. We all have. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Every time I look at them, I think about the decisions I made back then. How I let someone else take the reins because I thought my war was elsewhere. Cian studied him. And now I realize the war was always here. In the small choices. In the faces of people I once passed without learning their names. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, softly, "There's a boy in the southern district, barely older than Era. His mother died of fever last winter. He sleeps in the shell of the baker's shop and guards her ring like it's sacred." Daehyun blinked, caught off guard by the sudden weight of her words. "He asked me today," she continued, voice growing tighter, "if he could fight. He said if the bad men came again, he wouldn't hide this time. Not like before." She looked down, then up again, her eyes raw. "I told him no. I told him we'd fight for him." Daehyun stepped closer, his voice a whisper now. "You did the right thing." "Did I?" she asked, eyes burning. "Because part of me wanted to say yes, just so he could believe he had control over something. Just so he could stop being afraid." He reached for her hand gently. She didn't pull away. "We can't promise them safety," he said, "but we can promise they won't face this alone. I'm tired of promises. I'll give you something better," he said, holding her gaze. "I'll give you actions. Days of them, nights, until there's nothing left of the man who left you behind." She let the silence hold between them, then nodded once. "We've begun stockpiling grain and dried herbs," she said, "and we're fortifying the infirmary basement. It'll hold if they breach the walls." He nodded, his eyes distant. "What about the well passages? The hidden one behind the wine cellar? Does it still reach the east cliffs?" "Yes, but it's unstable. Collapsed in parts. It would take hours to clear." "Then we begin tonight," he said. "We can't rely on the walls. We need a way out. For the children. For the wounded." Cian's brow furrowed. "You think we'll have to run?" "I think we have to be ready for either victory or survival." She paused, then said quietly, "And what about you? What about me? If it comes to it, will you run?" He looked at her for a long time. "No," he said. "I ran once. I carried that shame across a decade. I won't do it again." She nodded slowly, something unreadable in her eyes. Before she could respond, a horn echoed from the watchtower. "Lo." One call. Not alarm. Warning. Daehyun and Cian turned to the eastern wall, where a sentry waved a cloth above the parapet. Movement. Outside the city. Daehyun climbed quickly to the tower, Cian right behind him. Through the spyglass he saw it. Riders. 2 of them. Cloaked in black, moving fast through the mist at the edge of the hills. One fell from the saddle, slumping into the mud. The other dismounted and raised their hands. A flag. "White." "Open the gate," Daehyun called. "You don't know who they are," one of the guards said, panicked. "I know they're bleeding," Daehyun answered. The gates groaned open. The rider stumbled forward, pulling the fallen figure with them. Cian rushed down with Daehyun to meet them. The cloaked figure dropped to their knees, panting, clutching their ribs. "Please," they gasped. "We escaped. From the Ironwood." Cian pulled back the rider's hood, revealing a girl, no older than 17. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears. Her lips were blue from cold. She pointed back to the other body. "That's my brother. They chased us. Through the hills. We were scouts. They're coming." Cian held the girl upright while Daehyun knelt beside the boy. He was still breathing. Barely. Daehyun lifted him in his arms. "Get them to the infirmary." The city surged into motion. Sentries were posted. Fires lit. Messages sent. Cian moved quickly, guiding the girl away. But before she vanished into the crowd, she turned and met Daehyun's eyes. "Soon," she mouthed, and Daehyun, carrying the weight of a boy barely older than Hanul, felt the truth in his bones. The reckoning wasn't coming. Daehyun stood just beyond her, his hands clenched, useless. He'd seen dying men before, in war camps, in burning villages, but this was different. This boy wasn't a soldier. He wasn't old enough to carry the look of death in his eyes. Cian didn't speak until she'd finished mixing herbs into a hot poultice. Her hands moved quickly, but not with panic. With focus. With fury. "He's poisoned," she said. "Same toxin we found in the well vaults." Daehyun's heart twisted. Then Sangil is already using it? She cut in, not looking up. "They're testing it. On scouts. On children." The girl, the sister, sat nearby on a stool, her arms wrapped tightly around her chest. Her eyes were hollow, haunted. "He didn't want to come," she whispered. "I told him we had to warn you, but he said no one would believe us." "I believe you," Daehyun said gently, kneeling in front of her. "You're the reason we still have time. What else did you see?" She blinked, slowly. "A camp, east of the Ironwood, like you said. They're not just mercenaries anymore. There are banners. Black ones, marked with a serpent wrapped around a flame." Daehyun went still. "I've seen that banner before. During the rebellion at Darren's Bridge. It's his mark." She nodded. "He's gathering more than soldiers. He has apothecaries, alchemists. They've been boiling something thick and red in copper vats. The fumes kill birds mid-flight." Cian looked up, her voice thin with disbelief. "He's making a new kind of plague." The words hung in the air like a curse. Daehyun stood, pacing. "If he releases that here, no wall will hold it. Not stone. Not fire." Cian rose as well, her hands shaking for the first time. "We don't have the means to evacuate everyone. And even if we did, where would we go? The north won't take us. The coast's still fractured." He turned to her, his voice low, urgent. "Then we make our stand here. And we find the boy who's making these poisons." She looked at him, startled. "You mean?" "His son," Daehyun said. "Sangil's heir. He's still in our custody. Still breathing." She narrowed her eyes. "You said no revenge." "This isn't revenge," he said. "It's information. He may know what they're planning. Where the plague is being brewed. How to stop it." Cian crossed her arms. "And if he refuses to speak? Then he'll watch the city burn with the truth locked inside him." She paused, then gave a small nod. "I'll send for him." Moments later, the young man was led in, flanked by 2 guards. His wrists were bound, though he held his head high. No longer defiant, but no longer confident either. He met Daehyun's gaze without flinching. "Come to gloat," the boy muttered. Daehyun walked forward, slowly. "Come to ask a question." "Ask then." Daehyun stepped closer. "Do you know about the plague?" Silence. Daehyun continued. "We know your father's gathering men, poisoning them, testing. But we don't know how he plans to release it. We don't know how to stop it." The boy's jaw tightened. "You think I would betray my own blood?" "You already did," Cian said quietly from behind. "You came here. You surrendered. Whatever fire your father lit in you, it's dying. I can see it." He looked at her sharply. "He raised me in ash, told me weakness would destroy me. That trust was a lie. That emotion made men crumble." Daehyun leaned in. "Then let him crumble first. Help us stop him." For a moment, the boy said nothing. Then, quietly, almost to himself, he muttered, "It's in the barrels." Cian stepped forward. "What?" The boy looked up. "They've already sent the first shipment, labeled as wine and grain, stored underground, east of the city, near the old aqueduct tunnels, meant to be released once the siege begins. They'll poison the air. Not the wells this time, the air." Daehyun's blood ran cold. "How many barrels?" 3, maybe 4. Enough to erase everything. He turned to Cian. "We can't wait. We have to send a team. Tonight." "We don't have soldiers," she said. "Only volunteers." "I'll go," said a voice from the door. It was Hanul. He stood with dirt on his hands and a hammer in his belt. Too small, too young. But his face held something Daehyun recognized. The face of someone who'd already lost too much to fear. "No," Cian said instantly. You're staying here. I can run faster than any adult, Hanul said. I know the paths, the aqueducts. I won't fight. I'll guide. Daehyun hesitated. I can do this, the boy insisted. Let me help protect our home. Seon's voice broke. You're a child. He stepped forward, eyes shining. I'm your child, and I don't want to be afraid anymore. Silence fell again, the kind that echoes. Daehyun placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Then you'll go, he said softly. But only with me. Seon's eyes welled with tears. If anything happens, nothing will, Daehyun said. I swear on everything I still have to lose. And as the wind howled through the open corridors of Valharis, Daehyun knew. Tomorrow could be the end. You remember what I said? Daehyun asked quietly. Hanul nodded. If I see movement, I don't run. I go still. I listen first. And if anything happens to me, I run back, straight to Mama. I don't turn around. I don't shout your name. Daehyun rested a hand on his shoulder. Good. Behind them, a small team of volunteers moved in silence. 3 farmers, an ex-guard with a limp, and Seon's apprentice, Mira, who carried vials of sedatives soaked in cotton. None of them were warriors, but all of them had made the same choice. The tunnel entrance yawned before them, half collapsed, a gash in the earth. The scent of damp earth, rotting leaves, and something bitter lingered inside. Hanul lit the way with a small torch tied to a long stick. The flame quivered but held. We go quiet, Daehyun whispered. Breathe through the cloth. If the wind turns, we back out. They entered the tunnel. The silence was absolute, broken only by the drip of water echoing from the deeper stone. It didn't take long. 20 meters in, Hanul raised a hand and pointed. Up ahead, in the wide, hollow cavern that once carried clean water beneath the city's edge, 3 barrels stood untouched, covered with canvas, marked with the serpent and flame. Daehyun crouched beside one, slowly peeling the cloth away. The stench hit immediately, metallic, chemical, acrid. He recoiled. It's already fermenting, Mira whispered, pressing her sleeve to her nose. The heat from the tunnels is accelerating it. The apprentice reached for a vial, but Daehyun grabbed her wrist. Wait! He moved closer, scanning the edges of the barrels. That's when he saw it. A thin, silver wire, barely visible, coiled around the base of the nearest barrel and strung to a wooden trigger beneath it. A trap. Don't touch anything, he hissed. They rigged it. Hanul froze beside him. What does that mean? It means if we make the wrong move, the entire chamber could fill with poison. Panic flickered in the boy's eyes. Daehyun leaned closer, trying to trace the wire's path through the dust. His fingers hovered just above it. We need a blade, he muttered. One of the farmers handed over a curved knife, shaking slightly. Daehyun took it with care. Then a sound. Footsteps. Soft, calculated, just at the tunnel's edge. Daehyun stood and turned, hand going to the knife at his belt. From the shadows, a figure emerged. A man in black armor, lean, sharp-eyed, his face partially obscured by a scarf soaked in oil. He held no torch. He moved like he knew this place better in darkness than in light. I knew you'd come, the man said. Daehyun's blood chilled. Sang-il. The traitor stepped forward, slow, casual. You never could leave things buried, could you? Daehyun stepped in front of Hanul. Don't take another step. Sang-il lifted his hands slightly, mock surrender. I'm not here to fight. Not yet. This was never about a battlefield. You poisoned your own people. I culled the rot, Sang-il replied, voice cool. So the strong could rise. The weak were always going to die. You just didn't have the courage to choose who. Daehyun's hands clenched. You speak of strength like it's a right, but you know nothing of it. Oh, I know strength, Sang-il said, stepping closer. It's what let me survive after you left. When Valharis burned, I built something new. I gathered men, coin, knowledge. I studied the art of war, not the kind with blades, but with minds. With fear. He glanced at the barrels. Those, he said almost admiringly, will birth a new world. You just haven't accepted it yet. Daehyun stepped toward him. And how many children have you killed to shape this new world? Sangil's expression shifted for a heartbeat. Something unreadable flickered through his eyes. You think sacrifice is cruelty, he said. But you sacrificed her. Seon. You left her to bury a city while you chased glory. Daehyun didn't flinch. And I've lived every day since trying to make that right. Sangil's eyes narrowed. It's too late. You won't stop this. You're wrong. And with one swift motion, Daehyun threw the blade. Not at Sangil, but at the wire beneath the barrel. The impact snapped the coil just above the trigger's tension point. The mechanism jolted but didn't release. Silence. Then Mira surged forward, covering the mechanism with wax-drenched cotton. Now, she hissed. Daehyun lunged for the barrel, gripping the sides. Help me. The team moved as one. They dragged the barrels away from the tripwire, rolling them toward the tunnel exit. Sangil stared, frozen, rage blooming across his features. You'll die for this, he spat. You'll burn with the rest of them. Daehyun turned, eyes blazing. Maybe, but not tonight. And in a flash, Hanul hurled a stone from his slingshot. It struck the wall behind Sangil with a sharp crack. Enough of a distraction. Run! Daehyun shouted. They moved fast. Sangil gave chase, but stopped as the tunnel began to shake. One of the supports, weakened by time, collapsed behind them. Dust poured through the air. They didn't look back. When they burst into open air, the city lights burning above them like stars, Daehyun collapsed to his knees. The barrels intact. The boy safe. The plague contained. Seon ran to them, her hands finding her son first, then him. You're bleeding, she said breathlessly, touching his arm. I'm alive, he answered. We all are. Hanul looked up at the stars and whispered, Mama, we did it. She held him close, eyes filled with tears. Yes, love, you did. And Daehyun, with dirt on his face and fire in his lungs, looked up at the tower of Volharis, still standing, and knew, in his soul, this was only the beginning of their war. Daehyun stood near the main square, watching a group of townspeople lift the broken pieces of the old market archway. One man, tall and limping, turned to him and nodded, not in greeting, in respect. He returned the gesture in silence, his chest tightening. The ache wasn't pain. It was something else, something like purpose. Seon approached from behind, carrying a bundle of folded cloth, fresh bandages. Her hair was tied back, smudges of ash on her cheeks. She looked at the market, then at him. They're rebuilding without even being asked, she said softly. He nodded. They were waiting for a reason. Now they have one. And you? She asked, stepping beside him. What are you waiting for? He let out a slow breath. I was waiting for someone to tell me it was time to let go of what I was, and start becoming what I should have been all along. Her eyes lingered on his face. You're already doing it. He looked down, voice quieter now. I dreamt last night that we lost the city, that I was back on the battlefield, alone, holding nothing but that locket. Everything was ash. The children were gone. You were gone. She reached for his hand without hesitation. Then wake up. He looked at her. This is our city now, she said. Not yours, not mine, ours. And we hold it together. For a moment, the only sound was the wind weaving through the open beams of the plaza gate. Then, Lord Daehyun, a voice called out. He turned. Mira approached, her cloak damp with dew, scroll in hand. She bowed slightly, breathless. Messages arrived from the Northern Watch. 2 caravans on the road, grain, medicine, tools, sent by House Jirun. They say word of your stand reached the outposts. He blinked. They're sending aid? Mira nodded. And one of their scribes said. She unrolled the scroll, reading aloud. Volharis may have fallen, but it remembered how to rise. A beat passed. Then Daehyun smiled, slow and full. For the first time, he let himself feel it. Hope. We need to receive them properly, Seon said. Clear the southern road. Ready food. Set quarters in the eastern wing. I'll organize it, Mira said, turning on her heel. Daehyun watched her go, then turned back to the workers rebuilding the market wall. There's something poetic about that arch, he said quietly. It was the first thing I ever had built here. I remember the ceremony. How proud I was of the marble, the design, and how little I thought of the hands that carved it. You're thinking of them now, Sian murmured. I think of them every time I look at what we nearly lost. A sudden burst of cheering came from the far end of the square. A boy, one of the orphans from the western quarter, had climbed the unfinished bell tower and raised a new banner. Not a royal crest, not a sigil of nobility, just a piece of cloth, hand-painted with a single symbol, a circle of interwoven lines, representing unity. Daehyun stepped forward, heart pounding, the image burning into his mind. He whispered under his breath, "They don't want a king." "No," Sian said. "They want each other." He turned to her. "And what about you?" She raised an eyebrow. "What about me? What do you want now?" Her answer came after a pause, and it came like a truth she'd buried too long. "I want a home that can never be taken again. A city where my children can grow without fear. A place where love doesn't feel like weakness." He reached out and took her hand, this time with full certainty. "Then stay with me," he said. "Not as something we remember, but as something we build, brick by brick. Not just Fulharis. Us." Sian looked down at their hands, her thumb brushing across his knuckles. "You're asking me to trust you again." "I'm asking you to walk beside me," he replied, "through everything that comes next." She didn't speak right away, but then she nodded, not with hesitation, with peace. "All right," she said. He pulled her gently into a quiet embrace, the city stirring behind them like a heart rediscovering its beat. And above them, the bell, long silent, swayed gently in the wind. He walked alone now, through the side corridor of the old infirmary, toward a place he hadn't returned to since the day the gates had burned. It was the room where he and Sian once lived during the city's early years, before the tower, before the throne, before ambition. The door creaked as he pushed it open. Dust clung to everything, and cobwebs stretched between cracked beams. But the room was still familiar. The bed frame remained, though the mattress had rotted. The hearth was dark and cold. A wooden trunk, carved with Sian's initials, sat against the wall. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before stepping inside. Every step felt like stepping through memory. He crouched beside the trunk, fingers tracing the initials. Then slowly he lifted the lid. Inside were remnants of another life. A blue shawl he'd gifted her on their second winter. A faded map of the city, marked with ink and wax. A leather-bound book, her journal. He hesitated, then opened it. The pages were brittle, the ink smudged from age and moisture, but still legible. He read in silence. "He kissed my forehead before riding away. I told myself I'd never forgive him if he didn't come back. And now I wish I'd just asked him to stay." His breath caught in his throat. "They say the city's cursed now, but I still set a place for him at dinner, even if it's just me and the silence." He turned the pages with reverence, each one cutting deeper than the last. And then, toward the end, a passage dated 2 months before the city had collapsed. "If he ever returns, I won't ask for apologies. Just presence. Just to hear his voice say my name like it used to, not as a lord, just as mine." A soft knock broke his trance. He looked up. Sian stood in the doorway, arms folded, her eyes not questioning, just watching.